Okay, all right, so let's start. By the force of your thunderbolt, I shall be freed of material bondage and shall give up this body and this world of material desires, fixing my mind upon the lotus feet of Lord Sankarshan. I shall attain the destination of such great sages as Narada Muni, just as Lord Sankarshan has said. The words aham samadaya manaha indicate that the most important duty at the time of death is to concentrate one's mind if one can fix his mind on the lotus feet of Krishna, Vishnu, Sankarshan, or any Vishnu Murti. His life will be successful. To be killed while fixing his mind at the lotus feet of Sankarshan, Vitrasura asked Indra to release his Vajra, or thunderbolt. He was destined to be killed by the thunderbolt given by Lord Vishnu. There is no question of its being baffled. Therefore, Vitrasura requested Indra to release the thunderbolt immediately, and he prepared himself by fixing his mind at the lotus feet of Krishna. A devotee is always ready to give up his material body, which is described herein as Gramya Pasha, the rope of material attachment. The body is not at all good. It is simply a cause of bondage to the material world. Unfortunately, even though the body is destined for destruction, fools and rascals invest all their faith in the body and are never eager to return home back to Godhead. Verse 22, persons who fully surrender at the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and always think of his lotus feet are accepted and recognized by the Lord as his own personal assistants or servants. The Lord never bestows upon such servants the brilliant opulences of the upper, lower, and middle planetary systems of this material world. When one passes material opulence in any of these three divisions of the universe, his possessions naturally increase his enmity, anxiety, mental agitation, pride, and belligerence. Thus, one goes through much endeavor to increase and maintain his possessions, and he suffers great unhappiness when he loses them. Bhagavad Gita 4:11, the Lord says, Ye yata mam prapadyante tam sataiva bhajamyaham mam vart manu vartante manushya partha sarvashaha. His devotees surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects, O son of Pritha. Both Indra and Vitrasura were certainly devotees of the Lord, although Indra took instructions from Vishnu to kill Vitrasura. The Lord was actually more favorable to Vitrasura because after being killed by Indra's thunderbolt, Vitrasura would go back to Godhead, whereas the victorious Indra would rot in this material world. Because both of them were devotees, the Lord awarded them the respective benedictions they wanted. Vitrasura never wanted material possessions, for he knew very well the nature of such possessions. To accumulate material possessions, one must labor very hard. When he gets them, he creates many enemies because this material world is always full of rivalry. If one becomes rich, let me turn that off. If one becomes rich, his friends or relatives are envious. For Ikanta Bhaktas, unalloyed devotees, Krishna therefore never provides material possessions. A devotee sometimes needs some material possessions for preaching, but the possessions of a preacher are not like those of a karmi. A karmi's possessions are achieved as a result of karma, but those of a devotee are arranged by the Supreme Personality of Godhead just to facilitate his devotional activities, because a devotee never uses material possessions for any purpose other than the service of the Lord. The possessions of a devotee are not to be compared to those of a karmi. 23. Our Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, forbids his devotees to endeavor uselessly for religion, economic development, and sense gratification. O Indra, one can thus infer how kind the Lord is. Such mercy is obtainable only by unalloyed devotees, not by persons who aspire for material gains. There are four objectives in human life, namely religiosity, dharma, economic development, artha, sense gratification, kama, and liberation, moksha, from the bondage of material existence. People generally aspire for religiosity, economic development, and sense gratification, but a devotee has no desire that has no other desire than to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead, both in this life and in the next. The special mercy for the unalloyed devotee is that the Lord saves him from hard labor to achieve the results of religion, economic development, and sense gratification. Of course, if one wants such benefits, the Lord certainly awards them. Indra, for example, although a devotee, was not much interested in release from material bondage. Instead, he desired sense gratification and a high standard of material happiness in the heavenly planets. Vitrasura, however, being an unalloyed devotee, aspired only to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the Lord arranged for him to go back to Godhead after his bodily bondage was destroyed by Indra. Vitrasura requested Indra to release his thunderbolt against him as soon as possible, so that both he and Indra would benefit according to their proportionate advancement in devotional service. O my Lord, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, will I again be able to be a servant of your eternal servants who find shelter only at your lotus feet? O Lord of my life, may I again become their servant, so that my mind may always think of your transcendental attributes. My words always glorify those attributes, and my body always engage. Wait, my Lord. Okay, sorry about that. My words always glorify those attributes, and my body always engage in the loving service of your lordship. Purport. This verse gives the sum and substance of devotional life. One must first become a servant of the servant of the servant of the Lord, Das. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu advised, and he also showed by his own example that a living entity should always desire to be a servant of the servant of Krishna, the maintainer of the gopis. Gopi Bhartu Para Kamalayor Dasa Anudasha. This means that one must accept a spiritual master who comes in the disciplic succession and is a servant of the Lord. Under his direction, one must then engage one's three properties, namely his body, mind, and words. The body should be engaged in physical activity under the order of the master. The mind should think of Krishna incessantly, and one's words should be engaged in preaching the glories of the Lord. If one is thus engaged in the loving service of the Lord, one's life is successful. 25. O my Lord, source of all opportunities, I do not desire to enjoy Dhruvaloka, the heavenly planets, or the planet where Lord Brahma resides. Nor do I want to be the supreme ruler of all the earthly planets or the lower planetary systems. I do not desire to be master of the powers of mystic yoga, nor do I want liberation if I have to give up your lotus feet. Purport. A pure devotee never desires to gain material opportunities by rendering transcendental loving service to the Lord. A pure devotee desires only to engage in loving service to the Lord in the constant association of the Lord and his eternal associates. As stated in the previous verse, Dasa Anudaso Bhavi Tashmi, as confirmed by Narottam Das Thakur. Tandera Charana Seivi Bhakta Shani Vasha. Janami Oi E Abilas. To serve the Lord and the servants of his servants in the association of devotees is the only objective of a pure unalloyed devotee. Verse 26. O lotus-eyed Lord, as baby birds that have not yet developed their wings always look for their mother to return and feed them, as small calves tied with ropes await anxiously the time of milking, when they will be allowed to drink the milk of their mothers, as a morose wife whose husband is away from home always longs for him to return and satisfy her in all respects. I always yearn for the opportunity to render direct service unto you. Purport. A pure devotee always yearns to associate personally with the Lord and render service unto him. The examples given in this regard are most appropriate. A small baby bird is practically never satisfied except when the mother comes to feed it. A small calf is never satisfied unless allowed to suck the milk from the mother's udder. And a chaste, devoted wife whose husband is away from home is never satisfied until she has the association of her beloved husband. Text 27. O my Lord, my Master, I am wandering throughout this material world as a result of my fruitive activities. Therefore, I simply seek friendship, the association of your pious and enlightened devotees. My attachment to my body, wife, children, and home is continuing by the spell of your external energy, but I wish to be attached to them no longer. Let my mind, my consciousness, and everything I have be attached only to you. Purport. Thus, in the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 6th canto, 11th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Transcendental Qualities of Vitrasura. So I can stop here and just share maybe 2 minutes of reflections. Hold on. So Prabhupada's really driving the point home about us becoming servants of the servants, das anudas. So I think I find myself too, there's so many times where we tend to think that the complete opposite, where we're the controller, there's no need to kind of have an authority figure, like I can speak for myself. I have a little bit of a rebellious nature. So since the time I've grown up and been conditioned, it's always thinking that I can just kind of go out and do any damn thing I want to do without anybody telling me what to do. But Krishna consciousness, at least for me, has been the complete opposite, to understand that every action we're performing should be in complete alignment with our Guru Parampara system. There's a verse in Bhagavad Gita that I was thinking about, which is a very popular verse. Let me just go to that real quick. We're on 12, in the part of the purport of 4:34, Tadvidi Prani Pratena. Right here, okay. So without this following of the spiritual master's instructions, what do we have? Therefore, mental speculation or dry arguments cannot help lead one to the right path, nor by independent study of books of knowledge can one progress in spiritual life. One has to approach a bona fide spiritual master to receive the knowledge. Such a spiritual master should be accepted in full surrender, and one should serve the spiritual master like a menial servant without false prestige. So Prabhupada's alluding more here on the importance of having an authority figure. So when we don't have an authority figure, there's 3 things that are being pointed out here right now. You have mental speculation, dry arguments, and you have false prestige. I've been through all that. I can say that I have certainly been through all these things, and these are kind of the stumbling blocks that prevent us from actually diving deeper into our bhakti, our attempt at serving Krishna. So I really like how Prabhupada's just driving that point home in this chapter, especially between Indra, who's this heavenly king. He has everything. He has this big, strong thunderbolt, all opulence, and then Prabhupada's saying he's rotting in the material world. So very similarly, sometimes, we go around and we may work or associate or see people that have these huge houses. Narada and I were driving around one time when we were looking for a new location, and we were in a certain part of San Antonio. And I was thinking, like, yeah, maybe we can find something here, and we start to just see these huge opulent houses. And after a while, you start to just feel like, wow, like what am I doing wrong? How come I don't have anything like that? What am I, a loser here? You start to get the material energy is so subtle and powerful that it can easily suck us in like a vacuum. There's someone I read a poem recently about a network of illusions that we go through. So I was just thinking about how this network is so strong and how it works so closely together. And we can easily get sucked into wanting to join that network, even though we may not have a chance of getting involved, um, due to our desires by how we associate with it. So we have to be very careful with these things. And that's why Prabhupada is saying to be a servant of the servant. It's a chain. We get linked into that chain, and there's no snapping a chain. There's no clipping a chain, right? So I really like hearing this talk. It's a great reminder for us in the morning. I don't know if anybody else has anything they'd like to share for a minute or two before we move on to the next chapter. Okay, Kurt, go for it. You can unmute yourself.
I think I'm already unmuted. Yeah. So speaking on what you were just pointing out here in this Bhagavad Gita purport, yeah, I understand that. Somebody, an old friend, who is actually an initiated devotee, she's not currently following, but she saw this meme, and it really just was just this really odd thing about the word God being created by Christians, and that it was just odd. It was like basically trying to refute Vedic understanding. And she said this, and she showed it to me, and she said, "This doesn't sound right, does it?" And I said, "No," and I broke it down. And based on the words that were used in the meme, and she's like, "Oh, you're an expert." I said, "No," I said, "This comes from Prabhupada's introduction to the Bhagavad Gita, and it comes from Acharya Dev." I said, I didn't make this up, I didn't make this up, this isn't my realization or whatever. I'm just, passing along the information. So
That's a nice
yeah,
point.
yeah,
As we become more Krishna conscious, we give the credit to Krishna. We don't try to take it away. So that's the difference. And I was listening to a class by Prabhupada the other day, and he said he was reading these different Bhagavad Gitas, and he says, how can these people write about this? Who are they? What credit do they have? They're not bona fide to write and speak of Krishna. They're not devotees of Krishna. So this is the difference, is that we become glorious by associating with Krishna, not on our own. So when we see a devotee that's great or amazing, it's because he's empowered and he's close with Krishna. He's getting some of that light sent on to him. We're not trying to take the credit for ourselves. So that's a really good point. I appreciate that. That's the whole
but
for
I
us.
also really like the point that was it the purpose? No, it was in the actual Bhagavatam text where Vitrasura was talking about the longing. I really like that metaphor of
The little baby bird and the cow taking the milk.
Well, I really like the metaphor of the wife longing for the husband to return. I thought that was very powerful. And I like that, and I think I think you touched on this too, that as far as with association, a lot of our struggles with material nature, a lot of it can be diverted by our association. In other words, we can avoid certain types of material entanglements with material nature by virtue of association, or by virtue of how we're directing our energy.
Yeah, it's subtle too, because like we tend to think of association just in the form of another person, but it's the modes. That's when you start to really make some advancement, is that you can understand there's particular modes that we're associating with, which Krishna is speaking through, and Prabhupada's giving details about throughout the entire Bhagavad Gita. So I think as devotees, we have to become more sensitive to these particular modes. Entertainment times we're waking up, times we're going to sleep, foods that we're eating that are explained in the 17th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, all these particular things that if we can become more strict on, then we become more empowered. We get the right sort of intelligence, and Krishna will protect us even more because he sees we're making that extra effort. And these things are difficult. They're really, really, really difficult because we have conditioning. We've all grown up in different sorts of environments that have created these habits within. And as Prabhupada said yesterday in a purport that we read, it's a gradual process. So at the same time, we can't beat ourselves up, like be practical.
Right.
This is where I'm at. Now, where do I want to go? So there's a big importance on goal setting that we have to kind of put before ourselves in order to achieve that result that we want. We can't just whimsically think tomorrow, next week, next month. It's like it has to be systematically done. That's why I really like Vaisheshika Prabhu's Chad program. He's giving you an understanding of how many pages a day it takes to read Bhagavad Gita. So you can have a timeline. And if you do have that timeline, then great. If you're late on it, then you know what you need to improve. If you're early on it, then you know what your strengths are. So we need some sort of gauge in order to achieve our goals. And we need each other too, to kind of cheer each other on because it's very difficult. That's why I really like this reading right now. It's like, okay, even if it's 3 of us, 4 of us online, wonderful. We're supporting each other. Nardi, did you want to add anything?
One of the things that I thought was really interesting is that earlier on in what we were reading, in the actual text, it was saying that Krishna doesn't give his devotees material like opulence. And I thought that was interesting because, it's something that we all kind of, I guess, long for. We want this comfort. But Krishna's not going to give it to you. And it's kind of like a gauge. Like if you do get things and if you're able to see that this isn't mine, then that's kind of like a gauge in your advancement of realizing I have less and less, really. It's just Krishna giving me some facility.
That's a nice point. Yeah, we look at Prabhupada and how fast within 10 years, he's starting off in the Bowery, he's starting off in some person's home with just a typewriter. And then within 10 years, over 100 and something temples, thousands and thousands of followers. I heard at one point he had some really, really fancy car. I don't know if it was a Mercedes or a Rolls Royce. And there was a reporter one time that, was kind of criticizing him about it. And he says, I'm a man of God. I should have 10 of these or something like that. I'm paraphrasing. But the point being is learning how to utilize this opulence in Krishna's service, which can be tricky. Some of us may not be ready for that. It may be too sensitive. Some of us may be completely there. You look at Pundarik Vidyanidhi. He had so much opulence, but then when he heard one sloka, he went crazy like a madman and started smashing everything. He had people fanning him, feeding him, sitting on a beautiful throne, all these things. But as soon as he heard one verse, he went into complete trance and ecstasy. So it's like, it goes back to the point that Kurt brought out, or the reflection he had about this longing for Krishna. To me, that's the real wealth. And he's saying that's spiritual opulence, is that when we can actually have that taste and that desire to see Krishna and to feel that separation, like the way a wife does a husband, or a baby cow. If you've ever seen a baby cow, if you've ever seen the gates open and a baby cow run in to take the milk, they're like completely ready, super excited, running in there, pounding the mother's udders, just going at it. And it's like, to wake up and then to just run, shower, get out of the shower as fast as you can, go into the temple and sing the morning prayers, be so excited to chant Krishna's names, be completely enthusiastic about reading Bhagavatam, and just so like enthused about it and anxious about it. It's like, well, do we have that taste? If we do have that taste, then we're probably heading in the right direction. If we're just kind of saying, okay, we're going to read, and all right, we read and now I feel better, then we still have some room to improve. So that reflection that Kurt showed that reflection that Kurt mentioned
Mm.
is very vital to this process of detangling ourselves, as you're speaking about, with material energy. Because the more that we have that anxiousness and appreciation, the less that we have that appreciation for these temporary, you know, items and things, and we can
And a
just
lot of
utilize them as an energy rather than my summum bonum of fulfillment.
a lot of the material opulence issue too is very relative because like for instance, you know, my guru is friends with Ambarish Das, and he said one time that it would be ridiculous for Ambarish Das to be, you know, to live like a pauper, you know, being a member of the Ford family and everything, to you know, that it would be totally ridiculous for him not to live in a degree of opulence, you know, based on, you know, who he is. And but this is also a man who, you know, gives millions of dollars to the Christian consciousness movement and manages, you know, huge projects and so forth. So that is somebody who is using his uh, position for the sake of the Christian consciousness movement, you know.
Yeah, I mean, as they surrender to me, I
Yeah.
reward them accordingly. I mean, one man's trash is another man's treasure, and vice versa. So it shows to the personal side of God. You know, he's giving one person this because they can handle it. He's giving another person this because they can handle it or can't handle it, and vice versa. I mean, if I had millions of dollars, I would not be here right now. I'd probably be on a boat with a slushy or whatever else. You know, it's just some people just can't handle it, and other people, it's a learning experience, and it's what's going to allow them to become closer to Krishna. It's more of a challenge for them. Others, it's just completely would swarm them and take them under to a lower planetary system in their next birth. So it's unique in the sense of understanding how personal Krishna is and God is, that he deals with each one of us in a very, very specific way, rather than it just all happening and like, oh, well, why is this person rich or why are people born sick? And it's like, that's the one benefit that we have as aspiring devotees, is that we can understand to one degree or another, or at least grasp the concept of karma. So without that understanding, what do we have? As that was stated earlier, dry speculation, assumptions. Well, you know, it's just when you die, you go to heaven. And it's like, come on, man. It doesn't work that way. So understanding one person's opulence or another person's poverty, it's all material. That really, really simplifies things and allows us to see that the material energy does not discriminate. How many times do we see these famous celebrities getting remarried 4 and 5 times? How many times do we see these famous rich entrepreneurs or celebrities or athletes committing suicide because they're depressed? You know, always looking for the next thing. I was talking about this with my wife. You know, you go by HEB and you see these, you know, National Enquirer and People Magazine, and I was talking about this this celebrity. She used to be on that Friends show, that show Friends or whatever. And I said, man, I always see this lady's face, you know, like with a new guy. Every time I go to HEB, like every other 4 months, you see this woman's face with like a new hunk boyfriend. So I Googled it up, and she's been in like probably 10 marriages, you know, tons and tons of relationships. Hey, you know, I'm not one to judge, but I'm just thinking like, that's the longing, you know? You still see that this longing for Krishna is there. It just gets changed into the material aspect of thing. It's like everything that we have, everything Prabhupada's saying about our relationship with Krishna, this longing, this desire, this fighting, this struggle, this sadness, the fulfillment, it just gets transferred into different areas. Everything gets transferred into different areas. We just have to turn it. And so that's a good point as well that you're making. This material opulence, I mean, for some it's you know, maybe a bit of a challenge, but it's more of a learning experience to bring them closer to Krishna, which I could never fathom, to have millions of dollars and allow that to let me become closer in my relationship with Krishna. I'm just not there, so therefore I don't get it. But I can figure out a couple of other things that Krishna's given me that allow me to kind of get a little bit closer in my realization each day. And for the other person, maybe if they were in my circumstance, it would be completely difficult for them. So it's like, we have to appreciate the personal way that Krishna is reciprocating with us, and that we're being allowed and given those lenses to see that whatever I have and whatever facility I may be using, Krishna is giving me that directly, other than me going out. And if you just work hard, it'll get taken care of. I've put in my 10,000 hours and now I'm an expert. It's like, give me a break. I know 5-year-old kids that come out and they're just prodigies on the piano. How do you explain that? So the beauty of Krishna consciousness is that all bases are touched, all questions are answered. And that's what initially, speaking personally, although I shouldn't, got me hooked, is that every time I had a question, there was an answer. I was just really like taken back by that, So it's 9:05. Maybe we can save the rest for tomorrow. Chapter 12 will be Vitrasura, or Wednesday.
Wednesday, okay.
We'll start with Vitrasura's glorious death.
I remember that, okay.
This chapter describes how Indra, the king of heaven, killed Vitrasura despite great reluctance. So thank you all so much. It's been 30 minutes exactly, 31 minutes.
All right. I really appreciate this practice. It's good. It's good. So
yeah, 3 days a week. Hopefully we can go to 4, maybe throw an extra Saturday or Sunday in there at some point or another. Thank you all so much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare